Yeah, we're live actually, and I'll just.
Heisenberg on the screen.
Okay, so share the entire screen.
We're just starting.
Hello.
Hey,
Stan.
My name is
Yeah.
Tom.
Olaf.
I got late for traffic jam. Managed how to enter the building while it was closed down.
These are the challenges. We were young on board for a long time. Okay.
All right. Okay, so those of you who don't know me, I'm Olaf, and I have not been out to a meeting in a long time, so it's nice to be back. And Alex had asked me to speak about attending the Perl Toolchain Summit. This was last month, and this year it was in Oslo. And who actually knows what the Toolchain Summit is?
Tools to do with CPAN and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Vaguely.
What takes place there?
You probably look at a whole bunch of outstanding bugs and do a hackathon.
Okay, yeah. All right, and who goes?
People. All the bright people who have some time to spare, I guess.
Yeah. So we'll get into all that stuff, but it actually is pretty interesting. I've been able to go a bunch of times now, and I actually really like it. And it's a good chance for me to sit in a room with smart people, learn a bunch of things, and also get some time to do the things that I need to do. So we'll go over a little bit of that stuff. I had given a talk at work last year after I attended the hackathon or the Toolchain Summit. And so I've just sort of upcycled some of the slides from that. So there's some content from last year, which I actually thought was helpful. And there's some content from this year too. So I want to actually also just talk about some general sort of Perl tips and tricks that people can hopefully use. So this year in Oslo, and just to set up the ground rules of the presentation, definitely interrupt me at any point. It's not like I have a strong train of thought I have to follow, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So I just want to keep things open. So yeah, so we'll just start with some background on the event. It has a fairly rich history. It started in Oslo in 2008, and the idea was Salva Nielsen who started up, and he apparently had been watching some stuff going on and thought, I need to get all the people who work on these parts of Toolchain. We need to get them in one room. But actually, can we define Toolchain? Does anyone have a concept of what I'm talking about there?
System software for the Perl infrastructure.
Yeah, like for example, like what would you?
So when you're installing a module, all the stuff that's involved when you're, doing CPAN, the CPAN command line, for instance, going to get a module, fetching it, unpacking it, installing it, running all the tests.
Yeah.
And everything around that. That's what I think of as one part of the tool chain.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, can we list off like specific parts of the tool chain then? So that's like the abstract, and then the specifics would be. So you talked about the CPAN command line client, right?
There's
Sorry.
Maker.
Yep. You actually mentioned CPAN itself, right?
Yeah. So the CPAN itself, and I'd be interested to hear about search.cpan is going.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
That'll be. And the whole,
more.
So the whole thing about running all the tests when you in a provisional way. So presumably everything is unpacked locally, not in the lib path. And you run all the tests locally, and then once the test passed, then you say good, and we can actually go and install it.
Yeah. So, so typically people that might be there. Well, actually, we'll talk about who might be there. But so the history is we started in Oslo, and then the next year it just somehow becomes an annual event. Goes to Birmingham, goes to Vienna, goes to Amsterdam. And the point when I went to Amsterdam is the first time when I became aware of it, because that's when I had just started working on MetaCPAN in, I guess, 2010. And one of the guys who had started helping out had heard about the QA hackathon, and he went down, and it was to Amsterdam. He was in Germany, so he just took the train down and started working on it. And then the next year it was in Paris, and Florian Ragwitz, who had been helping out with MetaCPAN a bit, he told me, he's like, you got to come to this thing. And he had explained to me really about what I should go. And I kind of was like, I'm not sure. And then he kept bugging me. And then I said, yeah, okay, this sounds good. I'll do it. And it's had such a fun time. The next year I wasn't invited. So
You've done everything you needed to.
Yeah. And then when it came back to Lyon, then I was invited again. And I went to Berlin as well. And I went to rugby in the UK. And then I was in Lyon again and also this year. So initially it's called the QA Hackathon, the Quality Assurance Hackathon. Then it becomes called the Perl Toolchain Summit. Any ideas why they would change the name?
They wanted to narrow the focus on just the tool chain instead of QA on all the CPAN modules.
Marketing for investments, or
yeah,
I have no idea.
So that you can get sponsorship.
Well, yeah, that's exactly the point. So when you get on the phone with someone and say, "I'd like you to sponsor my hackathon," what do you think of when you hear hackathon?
Yeah, you're going to break into a bank.
Yeah, or you think of a bunch of 20-somethings just eating pizza all weekend, locked in an office, trying to win some kind of a contest, right? That's essentially what hackathons have become. That maybe was not quite that way in 2008. So when you're talking to the people who have the access to the bank account, then hackathon is not really a compelling description. So because these people aren't necessarily always technical, or they might not be that in touch with the pro community, but they're willing to donate money. But if you have to spend all this time trying to convince them that no, this actually is something worthwhile, the feeling was Toolchain Summit actually is more descriptive. It's just a better, and it helps to sell this a little bit. And so that's what it's been for the last couple of years. And as far as I know, that's actually has made a big difference.
It almost doesn't have the negative connotation. It sounds UN sanctions. It's a summit.
Yeah. And then and Neil Bowers, one thing that has changed is from year to year, the organizers tended to change, just like we do with YAPC. But for the last few years, Neil has been taking on the sponsorship aspect of it. So he now has sort of a pool of connections of people that he can go back to year after year and ask for money again. So that makes things easier. And then there's a couple other people like Philippe Bruhat, who's been working on it from year to year organizing it. So things tend to go a little more smoothly. And then last year, for the first time, Maxmind, my employer, became a sponsor, which for me was helpful because Maxmind actually doesn't sponsor events. And for whatever reason, and we do a lot of open source stuff and we put a lot of software out there, but the money, the company actually does spend a fair amount on charitable giving. I think it's 50% of profits, but it's mostly to like other things like funding for diseases and some animal rights things like that. So it was neat to see that investment in open source. This is the group of people in Lyon, so a year ago. And actually, let's do a fun exercise here. Anybody recognize this handsome devil? Okay, so there I am. Who's this? I should maybe do it on the computer for everyone watching at home. Who's this guy right here? So the thing is, we hear these people's names, but we don't always know who they are. Who's that guy?
No idea.
He is the pause guy.
Oh.
That's Andreas Koenig.
Oh.
So he's been running pause for, like, how long has it been around? Like 20 years? Some ridiculous amount of time, like longer than Google, right? So
That's the new metric.
yeah. That's Neil Bowers, and we all recognize Neil, and also he presented to us, what, about a year ago?
Could be.
Yeah. That's Mickey Nasriachi. He works with me on MetaCPAN. Anyone know who this is down here?
No.
That's Leo Lapworth. He works on Perl.org, and he works a lot on MetaCPAN. And this guy, you got to know who that is.
Is that Sawyer X?
Yeah, that's Sawyer. And right beside him, that's Joel Berger, Mojolicious. This is Shoichi Kaji, I think is how you pronounce it. He works on CPM. It's sort of like CPAN, but it runs in parallel, so it's like a lot faster installs. He does a bunch of other interesting stuff too. This is Slaven Rezik. A lot of times, if you release something to CPAN and it starts to break, he will let you know before you know, and he'll tell you where he actually thinks things went wrong. That's quite helpful. That's Book there, Philippe Bruhat, always wearing a pink shirt. Down here, Devel Cover. That's Paul Johnson.
That's a cool piece of code.
Yeah, up here, Has a cat avatar on CPAN.
Karen Etheridge.
Karen Etheridge, that's right. Over here, that's Doug Bell. He's now taken over CPAN testers from Barbie. This guy right here. Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. This is Tux. If you've used Text CSV XS, that's basically what he works on when he comes down. This is Todd Ronaldo. He works at cPanel. He was working on grep.cpan.me that year. This guy right here, Bingos, Chris Williams. He runs tons of cPan smokers, and I think he works on like maker kind of stuff. I'm not exactly sure which one he like he specialized in. This he also has a cat avatar. This is Metaldu, Christian Valde. This guy right here, if you've used Data Printer before, that's Breno. And this here is Graham Knopharg. Just actually tons of stuff, but probably if you've used LocalLib, then you've used his work. This guy here, Aristotle, and Leon Timmermans, and I always get them confused, but this is Wendy, I think, and that's Liz, and I may have got that screwed. One of them works on Perl 6, and the other one sort of helps keep things flowing smoothly. And this is Babs, and she's helps out a lot with like user interface, user experience kind of stuff. This is this year's group. It looks a bit smaller. I think it may actually have been a bit smaller. We don't need to play this game again, but it's essentially mostly the same people. There's Chad Granham. He works on Test 2. And there's David Golden, who wasn't there the year before and works on a lot of the tiny modules. And there's Salva Nielsen, who was this year's organizer. And there is, anyone recognize this guy? Yeah, RJBS right there. Okay, so yeah, so and Andreas is from Germany, works on Pause. Miyagawa was there this year in San Francisco, I believe, works on Plaque, cPanam, Cart, and a lot of other interesting things. He's working at Fastly right now, so they sent him down.
Does he work on Carton? He did. I know he wrote it, but does he work?
So there is a replacement for Carton, right? It's called
Carmel, I think.
Carmel. Yeah, I haven't used it, but yeah, so this the status. I use Carton. I mean,
So
it seems
do I.
to.
So I love it, but I hate it.
Yeah, but there is that. So yeah, I think that.
It allows you to install your dependencies locally. So you create a cPan file with all your dependencies, and it installs them into a local directory. So you can have your applications have all its dependencies in the same directory, and in another directory you might have a different application. Really, really brilliant, but it needs work.
Yeah, it's a bit weird to get to know how it works. It also helps you pin your dependencies as well, so that when you install them somewhere else, you get all the exact versions of what you had in your development.
It is brilliant. I don't want to slag it. It's brilliant, and you guys should be using it if you're not.
Sort of container for Perl?
Effectively, you use
like
it with
Bundler or something like that.
Plan and Carton is what we use quite a lot.
Planv you use as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll use Planv too. Yeah, Planv is sort of a nice replacement for Perl Brew. So Kenichi Ishigaki from Japan works on Parse PM file and on Pause itself. So as of a few years ago, Pause was still running on mod Perl 1, like on Apache 1.
Wow.
And yeah, and then I think it was moved to Apache 2, and now it's actually running on Modulicious as of a few weeks ago, I think. So it's be much easier for anybody who wants to work on it to spin it up. That's not to say that the internals look much nicer than they did before, but you know, it is what it is. So it's old software, yeah. And Mickey, we saw, he's in the Netherlands, works at Booking.com, and he works on MetaCPAN Client, which is the Perl wrapper around the MetaCPAN API, and he does tons of work on MetaCPAN, far more than I do. And Sawyer was there at the Perl Pumpkin Refutil. If you haven't used that, that's actually quite nice to check if something is an array ref or is a blessed hash ref, things like that. Joel Berger from US on Modulicious, and he kind of bounces around working on different things. He does some stuff that MetaCPAN related stuff, and also he helped us convert to using a minion queue. If you haven't looked at minion, it's pretty interesting. You can use it even if you're not going to, if you don't care about the web framework part of Modulicious. Minion is a nice like really simple way queuing mechanism installed. I last time I talked, I was talking about Minion as well. So book, yeah, in France, test requires, which is sort of an interesting way of saying don't run this test unless this module is installed. Git repository, which is what you think it is. Nice way to wrap around Git commands, and app wallflower, which we are using, I think, for our TPM website, which probably needs an update. But what it does is it can take a because our TPM website has static hosting. We, I think, spin up a Dancer app and then run app wallflower on it. It converts the Dancer app into a static website. So it can do that with any Plaque-based application. It just spiders it and then dumps the results to disk. And then Karen, who's in Vancouver, who works on Moose, and really more things than I care to mention here. Just a really, really active person. Has maintenance on, I feel like, probably half a CPAN. Huh. And there's Doug, again, who works on CPAN testers, and there is a pro wrap around the testers API as well that he's been working on. And there's Tux on TextHTTPXS we talked about. Graham, who's at Booking.com as well, works on Moose Moo, local lib, test needs, which is like test requires, but I think that's probably the one that you would prefer. And he also works on Travis Perl helpers. Who's used Travis CI? One person. So Travis is like continuous integration, not just for open source modules, but it's free for open source developers. And there's a handy set of wrappers called the Travis Perl helpers that help you sort of bootstrap your Perl modules, and it's actually really a good way to run your Travis tests. It makes things a lot easier. And there's Breno, who works on Data Printer. He comes in from I guess he lives close to partner Babs, who helps out a lot with MetaCPAN stuff. Aristotle, who is in Germany, and Plaque middleware rewrite is actually kind of nice. Allows you to rewrite URLs through Plaque middleware rather than having to do it at the web server level or whichever actually layer you want to do it at. Hash multi-value, which is rather than me explaining it, I'd recommend having a look at it. It's quite helpful, and just a work we're also using that Plaque middleware signed cookies of his. And then Leo, who manages Perl.org and who does the like all our Puppet setup for MetaCPAN. Shoichi Kaji on CPM, which if you haven't tried, definitely check it out. It can really, really speed up your CPAN installations. Paul Johnson on Develop Cover. Also, we got Babs in there twice. Didn't realize that. And Tina Miller, who's working with Ingi on YAML stuff in inline C. That's interesting. She's also got a project for, I think it's bash completion that you can use in your script. That's kind of neat too. David Golden, who's in Brooklyn, I think, somewhere in there, and does HTTP Tiny. Lots of tiny modules actually, and file push D. I don't know how you pronounce that, but that's actually. Does anyone use that module?
What does it do?
Well, it's basically it lets you change directory. You create a variable, and when you change into a directory, and once that variable goes out of scope, your script changes back into the original directory, so that you can sort of like inside a scope, you can do something here, and then you know that you'll be put back to where you were before you started. So it's a neat way of not having to say go back to where I was. I can't remember what how you do it in Bash, but it might actually be push D. Actually, I think.
It's push D and pop D.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like a stack.
You use DIRS to look at the stack.
Okay. So yeah, I recommend that's quite helpful. And then Chad Granum, who is in somewhere in the Northwest states, and he works on Test 2, which is the replacement for Test More, which he's been working on for a few years now, and it is usable. Although I don't know that I don't know how widely used it actually is. So what I was doing for work was I was trying to sell them on, why do they actually want to send someone like me to the Toolchain Summit? So I would try to give a concrete example for what's the return on investment in sending someone to an event like this. Now, so taking one of our repositories at MaxFind depends on 7,391 modules, and that means basically if you have a distribution like Moose and it has 200 modules, then that 200 is part of that number. We're not just counting Moose as the one module. So it sounds like these aren't like all direct dependencies. Now, of the people that attended last year at the Toolchain Summit, they had main or co-main on 11,579 CPAN modules. And so what's main versus co-main?
Main means you're the solely responsible for curating any updates.
Yeah. And
you might write them, somebody else might give you a pull request, and you look at it, and if you like it.
Okay, cool. And what's co-main mean?
Means you share that responsibility with a couple of other people.
Yeah, exactly. So someone who has maintenance on CPAN module can release it. Someone who has co-main can also release it, but someone with co-main can't assign co-main to anyone else. So you have to have main to assign co-main to other people. So it's basically every CPAN module has one owner, but it has many people, or can have many people that can release it. But there's only one person who can assign like release privileges to other people.
Right.
It's like in a GitHub organization, that would be like you've only got one administrator, but you can have many releasers. So the intersection of the module perms of the attendees of this summit and the employees at MaxMind was 1,742. So basically, the people at PTS had it in their power to fix about a quarter of our CPAN dependencies, just the people in that room. Now, we have people at MaxMind that are CPAN authors as well. So to see what the comparison was, over our own stack, we have the power to fix about 14% of the modules. But there's one person who skews the numbers, and that's Flora. That's Florian Ragwitz. If we take him out of the equation, you can see on the bottom line, now we're down to 4%. So he's sort of up there with Karen Etheridge with the number of the amount of co-main that he has on CPAN modules. So now if we take the group of those authors and the MaxMind authors together, then we get up to about 27% of our modules. So not much more. You can see there's a lot of overlap between those two groups.
Do those
But
numbers include core modules as well?
No, because it was me going through like a CPAN file of depths and then getting a list of all the modules that were contained in, or actually me going through our mini CPAN. So it wouldn't have been any core. Okay,
but
it could have been dual life modules, like stuff that were, but also on CPAN.
But also you had Sawyer X there, who's the pumpkin. So if you had a specific problem, you could always go and say,
"You're not getting a quick release on that."
Not can you put in a quick release, but at least you could go in and put a good word on. Look at this module, we have this particular problem. Anyway.
Yeah. So Pumpkin's the whole. I think he's like a referee, right?
Yeah. True. Delegator in chief.
So I felt like I'd mostly proven to the company that it helps the company, but it also helps me because it gives me this distraction-free time to work on the things that I care about. And it's usually to an interesting place. Somebody had argued that maybe rugby was not an interesting place to go to. That's a British guy on our team.
It's in England and they have beer.
Yeah, and there's fish and chips and whatnot. Yeah. But usually when I go to these events, I try to get in a day early and, like, say, went to the British Museum when we were in rugby, or, I'll take a walk around Paris. Even if we're not in Paris, like if I'm in Lyon, then I'll stop in Paris the next floor and just hang out there and things like that. So yeah, so it's nice to be able to do that kind of stuff, and also I don't have that much time really, or I don't allocate a lot of my time at home towards MetaCPAN or open source things. So it's nice to just say, look, I have a few days a year where I'll just be in a room with these people and I can focus on these things. And then at the summit, we do have morning stand-up, where literally people will stand and talk about what they did yesterday, what their plans are for today. And it can be a bit long because there are a lot of people, so we try to keep it brief. But it is actually really helpful because you can hear somebody say, I'm going to work on this. And then you can say, okay, I'm going to go talk to that person in 10 minutes. And maybe I can influence what they're going to do here. Also, it's just the kind of place where you could say, you know what, I sent you a pull request like 6 months ago. Like, why don't we sit down and look at it right now? So those kind of things can be quite helpful. And lately for MetaCPAN, we've actually just been getting an entire table to ourselves. Whereas before it was a little bit more spread out. And actually, initially it was just me. And now we're able to get more of us down there. And so we get everyone at a table together. And it's like I have Leo sitting right beside me, and I could just be like, hey, what's this thing? Explain this to me. How do I do this? Or I could bug him. Could you please do that for me? And, Mickey will be sitting across the table. And so we can actually get a lot of work done because we are in different time zones. And usually when we're communicating, it's on a work day as well. So there's only really so much that you can get done. But the combination of us being able to have a morning stand up and then being able to be at the same table and then even hang out together in the evening, we're able to really get through a lot of stuff and make some decent plans. Yeah, and when there's a whiteboard, we can sit together and actually just make an actual physical list of things that we want to do, talk about priorities. And that's what we do at the beginning. We will prepare before we go to the summit as well. And we'll get a list of things on GitHub that we want to manage. But it's usually when we get there that we make this list. And then also somebody might barge in from somewhere else and say, I'd like to help with this, or could you please do this for me? Or how about we do this other thing? And we can sort of think long-term to it. A lot of the time it's like, yeah, that's a nice idea, but it's not going to get done now, or we can help you do it. But it's really, really helpful to have those kinds of conversations. So it's what they've done lately is have the venue that we work at in the same place as the hotel. Now, we didn't do that in Oslo. It was about a 10-minute walk away. But having, say the couple years before, like in Lyon Rugby, everyone's in the same hotel. You have breakfast in the lobby. Then you can move straight from breakfast to stand up. Your lunch is there, so you technically don't even have to leave for lunch. Then a lot of times you'll all go out somewhere together for dinner. So you're always just like this group of people that moves around together. And usually the conversation revolves around what you're doing. So it is this kind of thing where you're just almost always working, except for when you finally get to rest at night when you get back to your room. We used to have to share rooms before, so sometimes you still end up talking about stuff. Being European hotel rooms, they're usually pretty intimate. And I shared with Neil Bowers a couple times, and he was always so close you could almost reach out and touch him. And
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you have these stand-ups. Is anybody taking notes and following up on stuff, or how does that work?
Well, there's a wiki, so you can put your notes from the day in the wiki as well if you want to. I'm not really good about that. Other people are. Some people, like say when it is there, he'll do a blog post every day, and that's sort of a helpful way of tracking. You're encouraged to annotate it in some way because the sponsors want to see what's been done.
Yeah.
And so after the summit, they can be presented with this huge list of here's all these people and here are all the things that got accomplished. So that's quite helpful. Useful. And yeah, and then when you go to usually there's a bar in the hotel, and there's always just a bunch of people hanging around with their laptops, working in the bar too. And it's like, it's different over there because people will be in the bar, but they'll also bring their own alcohol from home and drink it. It's sort of a different.
It's not North American. Right?
Yeah, it's a much different situation. My room this year, actually, I had enough room to walk beside my bed, and that was it. Like there was a desk that you could pull down from the wall, but then you were like out of options if you had the desk down. So, and at least one of the guys was not even able, I think, to fully stretch out bed. It's just this sort of cubby hole. It's called the Smart Hotel. It was fun. I didn't spend a lot of time in my room. So yeah, so they'll have like a lunch spread here, and basically you could just graze on food all day if you want. I usually gain a couple pounds while I'm there. They get some healthy food in there as well. And people can have sort of breakouts. This was in the hotel bar. So they'll schedule some of these throughout the event too. And there's an IRC channel that's dedicated to the event. People say, okay, we're going to go talk about, the Seapan River was one of the things that came out of this discussion of how can we allocate a rating to a module that says how important it is in when this breaks, how many things upstream or downstream from this will break as well, so that we can encourage people to be careful about the choices that they make, right? There's always some unknown. You don't know if somebody out there is using your code in the work code, but you do know if it has a lot of CPAN dependencies, right? So we need to make sure that, say test more doesn't break, because that has a cascading effect on, most of CPAN. Yeah, and the evenings we'll go for a group meal. I think it was a Nigerian restaurant, and all these people here are just people from the summit. Okay, now what I was working on in 2017 was 06 perms, getting that into MetaCPAN, and also speeding up our Travis build times. So what I wanted to do was make the data available through the API and then also through the MetaCPAN front end. And I had worked on this a couple years before, and I sent a pull request, and at least one of the other core team members didn't like it, so it never got merged, and I forgot about it. So this last year I was like, I want to get this thing done. So what is 06 perms? Who actually knows what it is?
Something to do with permissions. That's my wild guess.
Mm-hmm. So who knows what O2 packages is? Right. Yeah, it's a list of authorized uploads for modules in CPAN, right? Usually the latest authorized upload. The way the PAWS is set up is, like, PAWS actually has a database running underneath. That's a MySQL database. But when you mirror a copy of CPAN, this PAWS's database is not included with it. But it does include a database in the form of text files. Some of them, one of them is XML. It's called Whois, and it's gives information about the CPAN authors. Then there's O2 packages, which is just I think it's like tab separated. Everything's on one line in a plain text file. And 06 perms, I think, is comma separate. We'll have a look at it in a second. And 06 perms explains, like, it's the authoritative way of assigning main to co-main for various modules.
So is this
got rewrite access?
Is this a text dump of what's in the database?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that gets mirrored out to various CPAN mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
As an aside, I feel like CPAN mirrors are becoming low now than they once were. For example, with MetaCPAN, like our CPAN mirror is, I'm pretty sure, behind Fastly, and Fastly is a CDN that has a very wide scope and can make downloads quite fast. It's not as important for the University of Waterloo to have a local mirror and things like that.
Yeah, and the pipes are all bigger and fatter now. So
yeah.
It used to be, oh, I'm going to install a module, an hour and a half, because I'm going to download all this stuff.
Yeah.
Now I have a 5 connection. Now it's like, well, I want to update this. Blam, 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 blam.
Yeah, it's all there right when you need it. So that's let's see. And what is PAWS? What do those letters actually stand for?
So the PAN authors. Special expeditionary.
You know what? I'm asking this question, and I'm not sure that I have the answer. It's the Perl author upload something. Yeah, server maybe.
Environment?
I think the SE might actually just be server. Maybe somebody can Google that.
System engineers.
But that's essentially what it is. And so what's the relationship between PAWS and CPAN?
Well, PAWS is kind of the input collector on its way to CPAN.
Yeah, exactly. So PAWS is the gatekeeper to CPAN. You need to upload to PAWS, and then PAWS will put will add your upload to CPAN. So they're two distinct things, but they do both need each other. Actually, and then just to get back to your earlier point about mirrors, you can always have a mini CPAN on your workstation as well. If anyone's hasn't tried it, I recommend that as well. That's helpful if you're going to be on an airplane and you need to install some modules, and some of us have to do that on an airplane. So the CPAN is just this repository of Perl modules, and it is CPAN stands for
Comprehensive Perl Archive Network.
Yeah. Okay. Comprehensive Perl Archive Network.
It's the copied after CTAN.
Right. And the
Comprehensive Tech Archive Network.
Okay.
I think probably might have conceived it. I assume it did.
Yeah, I think there's a couple other ones with a very similar sort of acronym and similar ideas. And when you upload your modules, you're actually uploading an archive. Like you're uploading a bundle of text files. You're not generally just uploading this one thing. And then this goes into the pause indexer, and then the pause indexer says, okay, this is who you are. This is what you're allowed to do. This is what we're going to do with this module. And there are different things that can happen with it. Okay, so exactly, what is a module? Let me just go back here. What is a module?
Some Perl code that can be used by other scripts and other modules. And the associated documentation and test scripts.
Yeah. Okay. And what defines a module?
The package statement at the beginning of the file.
Okay. Right. So if a file has, can a file have more than one package statement in it?
Yes.
So can a file have more than one module in it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So yeah. So I mean, it's tempting to think about a module as just a .pm file, but the .pm file can contain several package statements inside of it. So yeah, it's complicated, right? That's the best way to put it. And that's sort of one of the things that makes MetaCPAN challenging as well, because you can't just say, oh, this name matches this file name. Obviously, this is where you find this one thing. This is what we're talking about there with the multiple package statements. Doesn't have a package statement declaration, then it's not a module. You can still upload it, but it won't show up in O2 packages. And this is generally like when you're uploading a script, that they're kind of a side effect of a module being uploaded. So if you want to upload a script with your Perl module, where do you put it? Some executable. Where does it go in this bundle of files that you're uploading? Yeah, there's bin or script, and if it's in there, then your CPAN installer knows to install it where you put your scripts, right? But again, that generally wouldn't have a package declaration, or it doesn't need one. So a lot of people will upload a module called app : something, and then it'll include this bin script inside the bin or script directory. Okay, so here we are, Perl author upload server. I actually did look it up. Okay, should have reviewed these a little better. Okay, so it unpacks your archives and it assigns some kind of permissions to them. Your data is tracked in MySQL, and then it spits out these text files like we talked about. So when we put the two together, we get a repository which anybody can mirror info in it. It has a list of your latest index modules. It has a comprehensive list of author module permissions with the 06 perms, and that's what MetaCPAN and search.cpan.org depend heavily on. Okay, so these are the things so that's typically, this would be in one line, not last that data form validator line, it's just the layout of the slide. But that's typically what you would see in O2 packages, where you have the name of the module, a version number, and then a unique identifier, which includes the author name and the script. Does anyone know why the author is like DDF deferral?
Yeah, it's for so you can put it directly into the file system without worrying about inodes.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually it's like a really clever way to do it.
Yeah.
So, and keeping this in mind, you can't re-upload a file. So if Data Feral tries to upload 4.88 with that exact same file name, PAWS will reject that. So the side effect of that is that if you make a tiny mistake and you need to fix it, then you need to bump up your version number. You can't just replace what's already there.
That's so important. You have to move forward.
Yeah.
You can't make changes. Somebody could have already installed it. And they're permanently
and then it's like, oh, you've got the wrong 488. I just downloaded it. Oh, it's the wrong 488. But what's the new one? 488.
What if it's corrupt?
You
can't
corrupt, you wouldn't be able to unzip it.
Then
you
you
wouldn't be able to install it, so you wouldn't have a problem.
You just upload the next, you fix it and bump up your number one more and go with
you
it.
can delete the old one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you can run into sort of interesting situations where somebody who has Comaint on it can also upload the same version number because it's the path of the file name is now different.
Oh,
yeah. So you
do to get ugly.
Yeah, you do want to coordinate that kind of stuff, and I'm not sure how PAWS handles that case right now. Like I know Neil Bowers actually was sort of for a while uploading all this kind of weird stuff to CPAN to see what PAWS would do with it, and he's helped to identify a lot of bugs. So if we look at 06 perms for data form validator again, this is what it would look like, or this is probably what it looks like right now. So you can see we're just comma separated lines. The pause author, which is always uppercase, is the second argument, and then a C or an F. What does C stand for?
Co-made?
It does, actually. And what does F stand for?
Our founder, friend.
Nope. Like you're not, unless you know, you're not going to get it. First come. So you uploaded that module first. So because the way that you reserve a namespace in CPAN is by uploading something. So so TJ Mather, who's actually the owner of the company that I work at, he you can see he's got F on data form validator. He was just the first uploader of it. He then owned that namespace. And that's still the way that PAWS works today. You can upload anything into a namespace that is not taken, except for I think local. Local is reserved for you as a namespace that you can use locally without having any collisions on CPAN. So I don't think you can actually upload anything that's prefixed with the word local, uppercase L. Okay, so what actually ended up happening for me was the work that I had done a couple years before that was actually finally to get merged. Was able to get merged. We added a really basic UI on it. Neil and Babs were both there, so once this was done, I showed them my UI and they showed me how it was bad. Yes, and they made some proposals, and we still actually need to tackle some of those things. But there are some mock-ups, and we did actually this past hackathon. Aristotle sent some improvements to it as well. So, and that's the nice thing about MetaCPAN is because it is open source. If you really care enough, you can spin it up and mix to it. Okay, so that uses the permissions link, and let's see if we. So that's what it looks like now. So now, when you're on MetaCPAN, on the left bar, there is a permissions link, and if you click on that, say for data form validator, it will give you a list of the authorized releasers, and then it'll list off the module names and the owner, who is the person who would have the first come. Owner, a lot more obvious as to what we're talking about, and then sort of the releasers get listed there as well. Okay. Now, the other problem that I was trying to solve was Travis, and so Travis is this continuous integration system, and our build time's really slow for MetaCPAN. We have two main repositories. We have the front end and the API, and some of them are taking up to 45 minutes to get a build, and which is a long time to have to wait to see if a test failed. It's also a little bit annoying when you're at a hackathon and you have a set number of concurrent builds that you can run. It's like 2 or 3. 5 people are pushing all these changes at the same time, and now suddenly you've got a queue, and it's taking you a long time to figure out when things go wrong. And the cool thing about this was that one of us emailed Travis and we're like, we're at this hackathon and our queue is too big, and they actually just gave us more concurrent builds, and they said like for the next 4 days or whatever, you can run 10 builds at once instead of 2 or 3, and then that solved that problem. It solves the problem of the concurrency, but it doesn't make it any faster, right? Like you're still waiting the 45 minutes. So that was something that I wanted to tackle. And even if you don't use Travis, some of these things can be applied to your own environment. So as we talked about, solving the concurrency doesn't help everything. So the bottlenecks were that our module installs were all running serially. So when we were firing up a build, it would fire up a new VM at Travis, then do all the module installs first, but one by one, right? And so you get this module which needs these dependencies, which in turn needs those other dependencies, and it can be 5 minutes of just module installs before you even get to the testing. Our tests were also running serially too, so just one after the other, one test package and then another, test 01, test 02, whatever. And you run into a similar problem. We were also running cover on our builds just so that we can get coverage reporting, which is quite helpful, but because of the way it works, it makes things a lot slower too. And
you probably don't need that every time.
So yeah, you don't necessarily need it on every build, like on every job in the build, but it's nice to have it every time so you can see where things are going up and down. But the thing is, the default Travis test reporting is it lets you know after every job is finished, right? And if you've got 6 jobs in the build, you've got to wait till the longest job is finished. So it doesn't matter if you speed up the first 5, you're still waiting on this develop cover thing to finish. So basically what's happening is it's failing at the last possible moment. You will not get an email from Travis saying your build failed until this last build is run, even if you already had a failing build before that.
Because up until then, it's okay.
Yeah, it just hasn't wrapped up the results because it doesn't think you care, right? So if you're waiting on the email, you're going to be waiting for a while. So here are the fixes that we came up with. So module installs are running serially. That has a really simple fix. And as I was talking about before, instead of using cpan-, which is the default installer on Travis, use app cpm. So in your Travis config, you could just, in the before install phase, use cpan- to install cpm. So you can see that cpm it seems to be some kind of a play on cpan-, just has less letters.
So hidden.
Okay, now does anybody know why cpan- is called cpan-?
Doesn't do everything that CPAN does?
Well, what came after the CPAN? There's a CPAN installer. What came after CPAN? CPAN Plus. And after CPAN Plus came CPAN-, right, which is, I guess, like...
We have such poor sense of
poor. At least it wasn't CPAN Lite.
Triple plus.
Yeah. So then in the install phase, then we can use cpan-m install, and then in this case we're using Carton. So we have a specific path that we want to use for Carton, and our resolver, which is basically saying where are you going to go to tell me what my dependencies are, and we're using environment variables for those. That's what the dollar sign's about.
So does CPM run things in parallel then?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually at work we use it now, and it's just like, oh man, it's so much faster now to install stuff. I can't even tell you about it. Like how much less frustrating like really simple things are. Okay, and the next problem was we were installing all our modules on every single build.
Just a question on that. Are you running tests there as well in the installs? CPAN by default.
I think we're not. I think CPM is by default.
Huge time saver.
Yeah.
Because Carton install doesn't run tests. And
right.
If I switch to do cpan-m, I'm like, why is this taking so long? Oh, yeah. It's running tests and it's not telling me that it's doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we got I think the no test option with cpan-m, but yeah, it's not verbose really by default, right?
No,
so
which is nice.
Yeah. What's going on? Yeah. Okay. So Travis allows you to have a cache. And so using Carton, you'll want to just cache the local directory. And if using Travis Perl helpers, which I encourage you to do, then just cache the ~Perl5, which I think is by default what local lib uses. So that right there can help you a lot. So in tandem, the two of those things are helpful. So the CPM change only works, in this case now, it's only really fast on the first time a build runs, like before the cache is created. And then once the cache is created, you don't have to worry about installing modules anymore, unless you've added another module to your dependency chain that has to be installed. But Travis also allows you to go in through their UI and purge your caches. So after you do a cache purge, then again, you do get that speed up on the initial install. And you may actually not want to cache, like maybe that's not important to you. Maybe you want to get the very latest thing from CPAN every time. So just a caveat with the Travis caches is that it may not work the way you think it does. So the VMs are not, I think the caches might be stored in like S3 or something like that, which is not necessarily where the VMs are getting spun up. So with the latency on the network and stuff, it's not really great for huge files, but it is great for caching like things that require dependency resolution, like your CPAN dependencies. Test running serially. How do we solve that? Does prove have an option to run in parallel? Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. So. And if you're using Travis Perl helpers, it gives you this variable called test jobs. And that basically is inspecting your Travis VM, I think it's saying how many available cores you have, and it'll run jobs.
Oh, it's a -j like make.
Oh, is that where that's from? Okay.
Yeah. All I could think of was, well, I know it's -j for me, but that doesn't help you.
So just run that, and now you've got parallel testing, right?
When you started doing that, did you get any strange failures?
I did, yeah.
Funny you should mention that.
Which is good, because you can track those down and realize, well, were they testing problems or were they code problems?
They're bootstrapping problems. We have one test 01 that has to run before all the other tests. Right. And I think there's a slide in here that shows how to solve that problem. But yeah, then that's like a real head scratcher. It's like, it's all really fast, but not all of it's working. But there were other things too, where you're like, oh, this, you know what, there's like a race condition here between these two different tests, because like test 5 was expecting something to have happened in test 3 that inserts something in the database. So then you have to, to fix those things.
I think missing module use statements as well can catch you. If your app starts and loads a whole bunch of modules, they'll all be there. But if you only load this one thing here and it forgot the use statement, all of a sudden it fails.
Yeah.
Because something else loaded it for you. You forgot that use statement.
Yeah, that's good. And
catch those things.
I'm not sure, can prove randomize the order too? Like,
I think you can.
I always use test class moves. Randomizes on its own.
Yeah, it does. Test class moves is great. If you haven't used it, like, that is really, really a great way to go. We use it at work a lot. Okay, so basically when you're doing your CPAN installs, then just you can, I think CPM by default uses like 4 jobs, but if you want to, which if you can actually accommodate 4 workers at once, it's not harmful, I think. But this is just actually going to be explicit about what you're getting. Okay, so I think I may not have that slide in here, but you can create. There's like a test plan that you can create in YAML, and you can use it. It's like this obscure thing that not many people know about, but you can actually use it to tell Prove, run these tests first, and then run these other tests in parallel. So if anybody's interested in that, I can dig that up, assuming that it's not in one of the slides. But that is the way that you can solve that thing. So you can say that allows you to bootstrap with certain tests, and then sort of like just go whole hog on all the other stuff. So the issue with the deval cover builds, so we talked about how they're slow, and Travis uses something that's called a build matrix. And what you're seeing here in the matrix is actually definitions of environment variables that you want to have set for different builds. And so in our case, it was, so CPAN file snapshot, this is something that you get with Carton. And so with Carton, you have something called the CPAN file, and you have the CPAN file snapshot. In the CPAN file, you're just declaring your dependencies, and optionally the version of that dependency. You can say Black version 1.5 or whatever. You don't have to include the 1.5. And in that case, it'll just get the latest Black. Now the CPAN file.snapshot is when Carton says, it goes through like your local lib where Carton's keeping its dependencies and says, these are all the versions that are installed here. So that next time you do a test run or you deploy it to production, you get exactly the versions of the modules that you're running in your development environment. So you don't have any nasty surprises. And what we want to do for MetaCPAN is we want to have a few runs. I want to have a run that uses the snapshot, but I also want to have a run that doesn't use the snapshot. Now, why would I want to run without a snapshot?
It'll work for other people installing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I really want to know, if I update all my dependencies today, is this thing still going to work? So that's one of the things we do there. And then if you set this coverage equals 1, that's a special environment variable that the Perl helpers uses, and that says, oh, okay, let's run coverage on this. Now, when using the matrix, there's a special key called allow failures, and this is and you just tell it the environment variables, and that matches up the line in the matrix above. And you're saying, so in this case, I'm saying when I'm using a snapshot, but I'm also running coverage, it's okay for that to fail. I don't care if that build passes. And in this case, Travis doesn't do any sorting. So the way you describe the environment variables in the YAML file has to exactly match the environment variables in the line above. You can't, if you switch those two around, it won't know that they're the same build. And then what you do as well, one of the problems that we had with devel cover was I realized we're actually running coverage on the local lib, which is all the dependencies that we're installing as well, right? And this is like, Why are we doing this? I just didn't realize. And what's handy about this is develop cover has this really obscure syntax on how to ignore directories. So if you're using it, this is something to be aware of as well. Okay, so failing at the last possible moment. We want to fail faster. And Travis has a key for that, and that's called fast finish. So this kicks in if one of these following conditions has been met, at least one. If the only jobs remaining are the jobs that are in the allow failures key, or if one job has already failed. So if you got 5 jobs that run and one job has failed and it's not one that you specifically have said that it can fail, then you'll get the notice right away. This is a failed build. Or if you've run all your jobs and the only one that's left is the one that you don't care about, then you'll get a notification of a pass or a fail. So in this case, we no longer have to wait around for this really long coverage build. We will still get the coverage results when it's done, but Travis will let us know when the slowest regular build is finished. Like say if they're all passing, we'll have to wait till the end of the slowest passing build, and if one of them fails, we'll get notified right away. And then if you want, you can go into Travis and you can cancel any remaining jobs, and then it'll just move on to the new one. So that helps some of the issues with concurrency as well. Okay, so this year at the summit, what I worked on was upgrading our Vagrant developer boxes from Debian Wheezy to Debian Stretch. There's a lot that's changed with Vagrant since we started doing this. Before you had to go through this really convoluted process to build Vagrant boxes. And now you can just basically specify that you want a Debian Stretch box, and the company that provides Vagrant already has a box, like a basic Vagrant box to you available. You can just download that, and then you can start doing things to it. So that's much, much easier. We had to upgrade our Puppet 2 major versions, which had a fair amount of breaking changes. And I don't use Puppet anymore, so that for me was particularly confusing and annoying. So I had Leo sit beside me. I had started it before, we had this meta hackathon in Chicago back in the fall, and I'd started on this, and I sort of gotten depressed and given up. But with Leo there, I was able to finish it.
What do you use now?
I use Ansible. We use Ansible at work too. Yeah, I really like it. It's pretty simple. There's not a lot of magic. Like with Puppet, I was always it was just having SSL cert issues in bootstrapping and stuff. And with Ansible, you don't really bootstrap, right? You install it locally, and then it's just a bunch of SSH commands. So.
Went back to an old client where Puppet was set up and running, and they shut Puppet down. Some local changes on servers, and it's too dangerous to turn it on again because all the servers are going to come in and try and see what updates need to happen, and it could just kill everything. So you can't turn it on at all unless you remove it from all the other servers to try and get it bootstrapped and running. Wow. So it's being replaced.
Yeah, Puppet is a really big hammer. I don't know. I really do. I appreciate there's a lot of work that's gone into it, and it's done a lot of good, but I just don't like it. And then one of the things that happened here was that sort of the word got out that search.cpan.org was going to be retiring. We weren't allowed to tell anybody, but we had to prepare for the capacity because right now I think search.cpan has about double the traffic that MetaCpan has, and it was the Graham, who's been running it, and I guess the guys at the Perl knock, they just decided they're done. They've been doing this forever. I wouldn't be surprised if this predates Google as well. It's just been out there for a long time, and so kudos to those guys for keeping this running for years and years and years and years. I don't even know what kind of, if this may also be running on Apache with Mod Pro 1. It's who knows. So we worked on capacity for that as well, and that's part of. So MetaCpan sits behind Fastly. We've got 3 servers in the States with Liquid Web, and we've got 3 servers with Bytemark in the UK. And we have Elasticsearch clusters running on both of those. But the way Elasticsearch works right now, we can't have all 6 of those running at the same time because we have user data like when you click ++ or when you log in, those are sessions. And there's not really a good way to mirror those between data centers. I think Elasticsearch is working on a way to fix that, but in the meantime, it's well, we have one up and running or the other. So we just had to make some plans about upgrading them at one data center. We can switch traffic over there, and then we can upgrade our machines over at the other side. And I don't know if you've been to search.cpan.org lately, but it now has a lot of links pointing to MetaCPAN, and there's a notice on it going away, and some people who are upset, and a lot of people complaining because MetaCPAN is not exactly like search.cpan. People have grown accustomed to being able to find things in certain ways. There's certain problems that MetaCPAN doesn't solve as well as search.cpan does, but because it's closed source, I can't tell you how it did solve those problems. So we're just trying to iron out that stuff. People have been pretty cool about it mostly, but we're getting some bug tickets opened. So actually, does anybody have any questions about the search.cpan stuff?
What is closed source? Is it search.cpan which is closed source or MetaCPAN?
So the search.cpan is closed source. Oh. Yeah. So I've never seen.
How did that happen?
How did it happen that it was closed source?
Yeah.
I think it's just always been closed source.
Huh.
But it's only been one of them, I guess.
So yeah, so there's been a limited pool of people who've been able to contribute to it. That may contribute to like the burden around maintaining it. But and I don't know what the reasons are. There are like lots of legitimate reasons not to open source stuff. The first one being I don't want to. Some people are embarrassed about stuff they wrote a long time ago and they don't want to expose it to the world. There could be some gaping security holes that you would expose by uploading it. So I mean, it's not like it's unfortunate, but I can understand it. There's no reason why anyone has to open source their code. So I did say I was going to talk a bit about the Toolchain Summit, about how people can get invited to it. So there are actually, what's interesting about the summit is there are 3 tiers to it. The first tier is made up of core attendees. The second tier gets invited by the first tier. And then the third tier, I'm actually a little bit hazy on it. It seems to be some combination of the organizers invited them, or sometimes it's like a company sponsored and they want to send one of their people down as well. Usually it ends up being 30-ish people that are down for the summit. How can you get into a tier? Tier 1 is if you've attended many years of the Perl Toolchain Summit, you kind of are in tier 1. Not necessarily, but a lot of the people in the first tier are just people that have been there forever. Or you lead a Perl infrastructure project, like you look at Andreas, he runs Pause. It would be kind of silly to have the event without him. So he's in that first tier. Yeah, and so we've got this point system. I started out in tier 3. I eventually was in tier 2. For somehow I don't know how, but I'm in tier 1. Nobody told me how. But one day they sent me an email and said, you can help choose who's coming to the summit. So we have this point system in a spreadsheet, and you get allotted a certain amount of points, and you can put other people's names on the spreadsheet and allot points to them. So you can game that a little bit if you want. So if there are people that you want to come and they already have enough points to get through to the next round, you can allot more of your points to other people that don't have enough points. So, and I guess what I'm getting at is that for MetaCPAN to work well, we need a certain number of people to be there. So if there's somebody on the core team that has already clearly got an invitation, I don't need to put points towards inviting them. I can say this other person that is going to be really helpful, I can assign my points to them. And then, yeah, and then the third tier, it's sometimes somebody says, okay, well, how about this other person? They work on interesting things. Or it might be people that are not really so connected with the tool chain, but they're smart and they can help out on different things. So if you actually are interested in going to this, one of the best things you can do is get involved in projects or modules which are critical to infrastructure, like you can contribute to Pause. You can contribute to MetaCPAN, some of the other build tools, just things that things that we need, as part of, like, say, the Perl testing and installation process, like especially test 2 or test related modules, because there still is sort of that strong quality assurance aspect to it. Now, if you're just working on core Perl stuff, that's not really as important, because I think it's been 2 years now, there's been a Perl 5 Porters hackathon. I think it's been in Amsterdam both years. So those people are now also have the funding to get together and get everybody in the same room, which is great. Now, if you do get invited and your employer is unable or unwilling to pay for you, or only can pay for part, then the hackathon can cover your transportation, most of your meals, and your hotel. As in most of your meals, it'll usually be, you know, breakfast and lunch and some of the dinners. So you can actually you can attend this thing and not really have to spend much money at all, even if you don't have the means or the willing employer to do that. And that's really nice. And that's where the corporate sponsors come in, because these things can be expensive. You've got to, you have to rent the venue in some cases, and there's all the hotel rooms for 30 people. There's flying in people from North America, from Japan. The bulk of the attendees are in Europe, so you know a lot of them are just driving in or taking the train. So the thinking around it has been, it's actually too expensive to do this in North America. I guess if you're going to fly all the Europeans out, then and the venues here are actually just generally more expensive. So if your company is willing to sponsor, new sponsors are always welcome. There are multiple sponsorship tiers as well with different perks. You do get mentioned in all the blog posts about the event. Like, so I do a wrap-up blog post, and then I'm actually compelled to include a list of sponsors and say thanks to all our sponsors, and everyone copy pastes the same list into their blog. You can even get a featured blog post for your company where Neil or somebody will write a technical blog post that is interesting, so that people will be reading anyway. And then there'll be a blurb at the top and maybe at the bottom about your company as well, which is much nicer than some kind of a marketing blurb about your company, which honestly, people are not going to read. Right? And why would they? You can send a company poster that ends up getting featured in the photographs, and you have the peace of mind knowing that you're contributing to open source and making the world a better place. Anybody have any questions?
I'm curious, but the builds you talk about, you're surely working with Perl. What is it that you are building?
That's actually a really good question. So we're building MetaCPAN, the MetaCPAN app. So MetaCPAN is divided into two parts. There's the Elasticsearch part, which is the back end, and we have an API that's sort of a thin layer around Elasticsearch. So, and then we have the front end, which is just the search application, and then that talks to the back end. And that's sort of analogous to just having, you know, say running Catalyst and then having a, you know, a model layer with the database. And the reason we did that was because I didn't ever want to write a front end. I just was honestly only interested in the back end. And I just thought, well, just do this back end and have an API, and somebody, if they want to, can come along and write a search app that uses it. Because at the time, I wasn't really happy with the way search.cpan works, but I was definitely not interested in replacing it. But that's the way that it works now. And then the cool thing about it is that if you just want to, if you don't want to work on the Elasticsearch part, but you want to contribute to the front end part, you just spin up a Plack application. You don't have to worry about all these other dependencies like firing up Elasticsearch and populating it with a bunch of CPAN module data and indexing it and things like that. So on our Travis builds, yeah, we're running, say for the back end, we're installing Catalyst, we're installing Elasticsearch, then we're downloading some modules from CPAN in some cases, and we also have some like dummy modules, and we have our indexer index those modules, put them into the Elasticsearch store, and then we run some queries against it. So that basically is like a pretty good test of, will this work when it goes to production? We don't use Puppet on that part, so we sort of have to mimic the stuff that Puppet does by configuring the Travis YAML files to do all those installations. But it's pretty good, and it catches a lot of stuff before it goes into production. It's actually really rare that something goes into production it doesn't work. I can't remember the last time that actually happened. And then for the front end, it's running, it's installing another Catalyst app, and it's actually running queries against the live instance of the MetaCPAN API, because we don't, when the front end runs its test, it doesn't like spin up its own back end. So there are we're relying there on the network to be okay, and for the live API actually to be okay as well, right? Like when we say, is Moose there? We needed to say, yeah, Moose is here. So if something goes wrong on the live API, then the front end test will start to fail. And so, you know, sometimes those can get out of sync and that gets a bit wonky, but they're pretty good. But it's important to us. Like there are people that will submit a patch to the front end without ever having run any tests or anything like that. So we need to know that that's a healthy build when we get those pull requests from people.
It's actually an environment, not doing the compiling a whole bunch
Yeah, it's not a build in the sense like you don't get a product out of it at the end of it. There's no installable anything that comes out of it, but it's just so the terminology for Travis is that you're firing off a build, and a build can contain some number of jobs. So and each job is the installer running all of the tests and things like that. In fact, I mean, it doesn't even need to really run tests as well. But yeah, you can do interesting things with Travis too. You can have build artifacts in Travis. So if you actually are building something, and you can say if you have an account with S3, you can put your key into Travis, and then at some point in the build, you could have it upload that artifact of the build into S3. So if you're actually building binaries and stuff, you can do that as well. And what we use that for is we actually upload our CPAN file snapshots into S3. So if at some point we wanted to upgrade all the dependencies, we haven't got it set up that way, but we could say, give me the snapshot from the last passing build of master. I'm going to upgrade master with this new snapshot, and then we pretty much know that that'll pass. Because Carton, if you don't give it, if it doesn't have a snapshot, it creates one. So in that one build that we have without a snapshot, it'll always create a new one, so we can see exactly what would be in a build if we upgraded everything on CPAN right now.
Slightly off topic. But what's the state of the meta CPAN right now, and if you're a contributor to it, like where are what kind of work is left over?
Okay, so the question is, what's the state of meta CPAN, and what are the things that people could contribute to? So the state of meta CPAN is that it's getting older. It's been around since, what were we saying, like 2010. So there are, it's to the point now where there are things we want to rip out of it, but things that we probably can't really rip out of it. And so that, that it'll take a long time. Yeah, I don't want to get too much into details on those things, but say like if I had to rewrite it today, I wouldn't do it in Catalyst. I would do it in Mojo. And we use this Elasticsearch X model class, which Moritz, one of the first guys working on meta CPAN, had written to make it easier to use Elasticsearch, but it's now kind of made it harder, like over time. So, but it's like so stuck in there that we can't just rip it out. But those are tough problems to solve. If you were interested in contributing to meta CPAN, you wouldn't start with that. Like there's a pretty big list of bugs, but there's also a huge list of feature requests. And so we're kind of having to balance, like, well, do we want to do this thing that this person thinks is a good idea, or do we want to fix this other annoying thing? And is this annoying enough to actually fix? Those kinds of things. So so we're constantly having to try and prioritize things, and running into sort of situations where somebody says, I want to implement this thing, and you kind of have to say, well, are you going to be around to fix it when it breaks? Right. So I did have one person contribute something that was kind of interesting, but it broke shortly thereafter, and I ended up contacting them saying, like, try to be nice about it, but it's like, if you don't fix it, I'm just going to revert it. So because there's nobody around that wants to take care of this thing, right? Like nobody's a champion of this issue. And so now it's just this broken part of meta CPAN. So if anybody wanted to contribute, there are front end things to do, there are back end things to do. There, say we could upgrade to the next version of Bootstrap. We're looking at, actually, let me just see if I can show you. Let me just see here. Yeah, that's what I want to do here.
Is there a getting started doc that can get you a VM with meta CPAN up and running?
Yeah, there is. You can, if you go to, there's a repository called meta CPAN Developer, and there's a couple things in it that are kind of broken in right now that I'm hoping to fix in the next week. But you can basically in a few minutes get your own Vagrant box, and you can get it up and running. And that's great if you're working on the back end. If you're working on the front end and you want to just install a bunch of Plaque modules, you can just easily do that. You can easily just clone the repository and install, and then just fire some stuff up on port 5001. And
so you were saying with the front end, you could actually just talk to the API, the live API that's out there.
Yeah, it's way easier than if you're going to tackle the back end, which I would encourage people to do. There's more ramp up time, but if you just want to do a quick fix on the front end, you can just really easily get things spun up. So Babs has got a concept for, say, this would be a cleanup of the author page. Does look familiar to anyone? Yes, basically stolen from GitHub, right? So, which is, great artist steal. Is that? Basically, I don't think there's. Yeah, I think GitHub actually does a really good job. So I think borrowing sort of some of those design elements makes a lot of sense. So there are like these kinds of things that need to be implemented. That's the permissions. That, yeah, it's a little bit different than what we have now. And the favorites. I would like for authors to be able to sort their distributions by the ones that have the most favorites and things like that. Those are sort of nice things to do. But yeah, they're like, what we really need is if somebody wanted to come in and take on this kind of a front end cleanup, because it is starting to get really cluttered. Like we just keep adding more stuff to the UI and we don't really peel stuff back. That's a big thing that we can focus on.
The UI is hard.
Yeah, no, it really is, and it's hard to find like a back-end developer that is really good with front-end stuff, right? Like
when you work with a really good UI person, you realize how hard it is.
Yeah.
And they can show you, why don't you do this? Oh, that's really good. I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that I don't know many of those people that want to contribute to an open source project, So I don't know how they're spending their spare time, but it's not coming to MetaCPN to volunteer in most cases.
JavaScript frameworks.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to work on the front end, really easy to get started. You want to work on the back end, not as easy, but definitely doable. If you're interested in Elasticsearch, like that kind of like NoSQL stuff, then there's lots of really interesting stuff that can be done on the back end as well, adding new endpoints. We're looking at implementing Swagger as a way of documenting the API as well. If anybody's interested in that, we're sort of part way to. I merged some code so that the API can now serve up static assets, so that we could start doing like Swagger. We have added a bunch of endpoints that are like entirely undocumented. So one endpoint needs to be documented is an endpoint that now gives you the same results that the search will give you on the front page. And once that's documented, the developer of an app called Dash can then use Dash to start indexing more CPAN modules. Does anyone use Dash? Yeah, let me see. Dash is just this way of I don't want to get a new version right now. Yeah, of just, you can just download docs for all these different things, and then it's searchable, and it's got an Alfred shortcut as well. So does anyone use Alfred? Yeah, Alfred's great. Actually, if you use Alfred, it's got a great MetaCPN shortcut where you say plaque. Right now, it's actually just using my bookmarks, but maybe it's just there. So it's a little bit slow right now. This one, there are two workflows. One's written in Perl. This one's actually written in Go. The Go workflow is faster. But so yeah, that's like just a really easy way to then bounce over to MetaCPN. Then I really like that. Yeah, for sure. Actually, as long as I've got your attention here, maybe I can just show off a couple of my modules. Got a couple minutes left here. Come on. Okay. So there we go. So the first one's called Lazy. And there's an app called lib::xi, or there was Acme Magic Pony, I think it was. Anyone familiar with those? Remember what it does? It does what this does, and this just basically has a look at the use statements in your module, and if you fire up some code and the module is not available on your system, it just downloads it and installs it. So if you get a gist from someone, you can just put a use lazy as the first line, and as soon as you run it, the way it works is it installs an add inc hook. Does anyone know what an add inc hook is? Okay, so adding, okay.
Usually in add inc you put directories. You can actually put a code reference as well.
Yeah.
And it'll execute that to try and find
I read about
paths that it wants to search.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean the code ref can actually do anything. But in this case, it will. In this case, the code ref is like, so the code ref I install at the end of add inc, and so if it gets to that point, that means it hasn't found the module, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll just try and install this module. So what I do is then I put the entire add inc after that again, so the code ref ends up sitting in between. So it's like, can't find the module, try to install it, now try to find it again. Yeah.
Brilliant.
And one of the cool shortcuts that somebody pointed out to me is you can just use that module at the command line. So now you don't even have to edit your script. If you just do Perl-m lazy, then it will install your script for you.
Yeah, cardinals.
You're usually,
Well,
running your script as yourself, but so that means it would install it and tilde then, right?
Yeah. So this uses CPM. So which what I've done is it by default does a global install. So it like I'm using plenv and CPM, so it installs it globally into a place where I'll be able to use the app without using sudo. But you can pass arguments to it as well. Like, so if you look at this argument right here, you can just tell it where to expect local lib. And so that in that case, you don't have to pollute any of your installations. It'll just say, oh, you're missing all this stuff. I'll put it in this directory you're not using for anywhere else. Then I'll look for it in this directory while I run your script. So if you're a little bit iffy on what you're doing, then you can do that as well. And then there is, does anybody use Ale, the Vim plugin? Okay, cool. So there's a plugin for that called, I think, Syntax Check Perl. And I've got a fork of that. Okay, which is really cool because it now, when you run it in Vim, it'll show you the difference between the warnings and errors in your code. And with my fork, I can like pass arbitrary. I can stack stuff on add inc. And so if I add lazy in, when it does the syntax check of Perl, it will actually install any missing modules as well, asynchronously while you're writing your code. So as you put in the use statements, the stuff gets installed to your system, which is, I think, is kind of cool. But yeah, if you're using Vim at all, I would definitely suggest using Ale. It's a lot faster than Syntastic, because Syntastic doesn't run asynchronously, so you end up waiting around for a lot of steps. So
that could be updated then to update a cpan file as well and install it all in local while you're in.
Yeah, how much fun have we had snapshot file?
Yeah, I
things
know.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah. So if you want, yeah, you could. Yeah, right. Because CPM basically acts a bit like Carton. But yeah, let me know if you can.
You're already specifying the local directory.
Yeah.
Local food, so you make that local, and that makes Carton happen.
Yeah.
And if you add the dependency in the cpan file.
Well, yeah, by default it actually is local.
Right.
If you're not doing the global install, yeah.
The only thing is cpan file snapshot. But yeah,
Oh yeah, so
I think Sean's cringing here because cpan file snapshot is what we have problems with.
oh right, so yeah, but to install the snapshot, yeah, all you would need to do is add a carton install at the end of it. Yeah. I like the way you think.
issue is, and he's done this to me many times, is he'll run carton install, and we're on an earlier version of Catalyst, and then when you just do carton install, it goes and upgrades Catalyst, and then it updates the snapshot file saying, hey, go get this new version of Catalyst.
Oh right, oh, because you run install without any arguments.
Yes,
you need to do
dash deployment.
Dash deployment, and it only grabs the versions that are listed in the snapshot.
You can tell who does the builds.
Sean, the snapshot file is broken. Fix it. It is good though, Carton as well.
Yeah. So there's this other thing that I've been playing around with, and it's called openness. And so I'm really tired of when I open a stack trace to have to like copy paste a module name out of it, switch out the colons with slashes, maybe add a .pm to the end. and then, you know, remember what line number it was, and then switch that line number in Vim. So basically what this open this does, it installs an executable called OT, and you just pass it stuff, and it tries to do the right thing with it. So like in the first case, this might come out of a stack trace. You can just pass it that whole thing, and it'll just try and open it in your editor at the line and open the file. So it'll by default look in your lib, and it'll look in tlib as well, and it'll look in your add_inc. So say if you just want to actually look at the source of plaque, and it's installed globally, it's not in your local lib, you can say OT plaque, and it'll just open plaque for you. And also, yeah, so and just give it a module name with colons, it'll do the right thing. You can give it a module name with colons and a function or a method name, and what it'll do is it will open the file, and it'll grep the file first to try and find that sub declaration, and then it'll pass that as a line argument to your editor. So you can open there. It should also work in this case. And if you're using git grep and you get a colon line number, it'll do the right thing there as well. And again, so yeah, you can open a core module here, add a function just by using that. So I find this one of those things that, yeah, it saves me a few seconds here and there. And but mostly it just makes me less frustrated. That makes me happy.
I didn't see any examples for eval. Might be a tricky one to find.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you have anything you think I'm missing, okay. And then I've got this Git helpers stuff, and it does some things that. So the cpan repo, basically, it's a binary that if you type cpan-repo and then moose, it will open your browser in the moose repository at GitHub. So it'll just automatically open that. If you're inside a Git repository and you type gh-open, it will open that repository at GitHub as well. If it passes a -b, it'll open it to a specific branch name. Travis-open, if you're inside that repo, will just open the Travis build log for that. And then delete Git branches is like a little interactive script that'll list your Git branches either locally and remotely, and it'll let you toggle a list of those that you can then delete, which I find is handy just for branch cleanups, because I just a lot of times just end up with a bunch of stuff. And you can kind of grep on those to narrow them down as well, so that like say at work, it's hard for me when I'm looking at everybody else's stuff, like, because there might be like 200 branches, because there's some guys that refuse to clean up their branches. So I can just say grep on, and I prefix all my branches with my name. So I just say grep on these, and then I can sort of see which ones I want to delete. Yeah, and then I'm just going to make one last cry for help. If anybody's interested in working on open source stuff at all, and libww Perl organization on GitHub, we're always looking for people to chip in. That includes LWP user agent, www mechanize, HTTP message, like a whole slew of stuff that is pretty important to cpan. So sort of runs under the hood on a lot of stuff, but that doesn't really get a lot of love. Like, we all assume somebody's taking care of it, but it's not necessarily always the case. I even just need people to come and look at pull requests and say, yeah, this looks good to me, or this doesn't look good, or even just take an old branch, rebase it like off a pull request, and just see it and run it and see if the tests work. So I had somebody close a pull request today, and he said, I'm closing this because in 4.5 years nobody's looked at it. And he was right, because it didn't even have a single comment on it, right? I mean, the cool thing was he was in the process of sending a bunch of other pull requests, but I think he was just like, clearly you guys don't care about this. And that's not really the case. The problem with those models is that we have to be pretty conservative in what we merge. So unless you're really, really sure that this thing's a good idea, like really, really hesitant to merge it and ship it. But even though there's like there's like much sexier modules out there as far as user agents go, like Mojo user agent, like the truth is that there's still tons of cpan that runs on this stuff, especially stuff like wrappers around APIs, things like third-party services. A lot of times use LWP user agent or Mechanize or some form of those things. So it's that probably could use its own hackathon, but there you go. All right, thanks for listening, everyone. All right.
Wilco have any comments?
Where do those modules track issues? Are they still using RT or?
So we've moved everything over to GitHub. Oh, you know what? That's James Keenan has something to say here. So Miguel is always writing replacements for his own applications. I use it for most of my GitHub repos now. Some of the CPAN mirrors are actually faster than cpan.org. Also, okay, this is referring to many things here.
Yeah.
Okay, /scripts
is an hour and a half ago.
Yeah. Been using Devel Color for 14 years. Right, I do remember actually Jim speaking about that. Are you talking to us, Jim?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I see the top of your head. Oh.
Oh, how's that?
Okay, cool. You know what? I didn't realize you were there because I'm presenting on the same machine that we're using here right now. I'm trying to. I don't know if we can actually see you without getting the. Sorry. Oh, okay. All right, Jim. We can hear you if you want to speak.
Okay. Yeah. So those are just some comments I made over the course of the discussion. But I guess nobody was following along on a laptop because you're all in that room. So one thing I did want to say is on the question of, well, why isn't the search.cpan.org source code open source? And I don't have a specific answer to that, but if you turn the clock back 20, 25 years when our infrastructure was being built up, it was not the common practice to open source the infrastructural code at that time. The projects were viewed as the wondrous creations of Andreas in the case of Pause, or CPAN itself in the case of Yarko, or search.cpan, Graham, Elaine Ashton also played a role in it. And it was the projects that those people were interested in, and that they could get sponsorship in order to create the servers that would run it. And there also did not exist the type of central repository such as we now have in GitHub.com. I mean, after all, it was only like, if you think 2009 was when suddenly Git became the craze, and 2010 was the first time that a lot of the community's infrastructure began to move to GitHub.com. So it was only after that point that a lot of this infrastructure, and of course that was about the same time that the Perl QA hackathon developed, and the notion, and since that's really focused on a lot of the infrastructure, that's when a lot of that code became open source in turn. I'm really sad that search.cpan.org is going away. I really like the interface. I have it, in my fingertips. And I'm also a bit disappointed that the Perl.org sysadmins did not announce, look, this is becoming a maintenance burden to us. If people want this, and apparently people do, because the statistics that you cited say that, it still gets much more traffic than metacpan.org. I wish they had put out a call for people who were interested in taking over the code and developing it before they had simply announced that it's going away. Granted, they're working on a volunteer basis as well, but I'm sad that it's going away because I really know how to get around that interface quick, and for most of the things that I want, it is sufficient. The type is bigger and easier to read, which is more important to me as I get older. There are some things in the metacpan.org interface that I think are really good, like the list of reverse dependencies. I use that because the other site that alleges to list dependencies has incorrect data. Well, those are just some of my comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Jim, so I see you noted that Proof does have an argument for shuffling.
Yeah. The man page says that. I've never used it myself, but some people like it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for that. Now, can you speak to the fact why you think that running coverage on Travis is a bad idea?
Well, DevelCover it's a developer's tool, and it's the sort of thing that you learn to use judiciously. So that, for example, if I am looking, let's say that I have downloaded the source code from either SEO or from GitHub of a module, and there's something that I really want to contribute to it. Well, once I do, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to see how extensive the test coverage it is. But I am quite happy to just run that test coverage locally. And that will guide me in terms of which additional tests that I need. I don't see any advantage to having Travis run coverage analysis. I mean, granted, perhaps if it's a question of evaluating someone else's pull request, you might want to do it. But having used DevelCover, since 2004, I am quite content to use it locally, and I have myself experienced that when you have DevelCover in your Travis configuration, that your results don't come back as quickly, and they may fail at the last minute, as you found out, because of some fluke in DevelCover rather than in the source code being tested.
Right. Okay, yeah, so that's fair. Like what we usually do is use DevelCover in tandem with coveralls.io. So at least, yeah, on a pull request, you can see whether or not the coverage goes up and down. In principle, it doesn't go up or down much. So it's not always that helpful. But I think it is helpful to be able to go in at any given point in time and see where you're at with coverage. Like, for one of the things for me for DevelCover is I always have to look up how to run it. So if it's just kind of running on its own in Travis, then I don't have to worry about that.
Well, I mean, I wrote a little shell function, about 15 years ago, yeah, that I call it harness, and it runs that, and that's the only I don't get really fancy with that, though I have used that ignore option that you cited. Another thing is, for me, if it's something that is really important to me, like somebody is making a pull request on one of my CPAN modules that I know other people use, that has reverse dependencies and is used in production, I'm not going to be content to just look at it up on GitHub and say, oh, this PR looks good, merge. I'm going to download it to my local box as a patch, and I'm going to work at it in the old-fashioned way. And I'm going to work at it much more thoroughly there before I consider merging it up on GitHub. Other people work differently, but and other people have modules that have much wider usage, so maybe they receive more pull requests than my modules do. So I'm just a lot of this is I learned how to do module development before things like Git and GitHub came around, and consequently, it's all in my fingertips, and I'm more confident of the results doing that than I would be if I switched to newer ways.
Right.
What it comes down to is, I'm no longer young, and I'm not one of the cool kids. I dislike Distzilla, so that sort of excludes me from being among the cool kids among the Toolchain gang. But in particular, I don't really see the need for DevelCover on Travis. But, for most of my work, I am the sole developer. What you're talking about with MetaCPAN is much more of a collaborative project.
I was going to say DevelCover kind of on its own as well. Because your test suite tests the application. The cover tests your test.
I can't hear the remark.
Yeah, can you speak up?
You want to repeat it?
You were saying develop cover test your test suite?
Yeah. Develop cover doesn't really test your application.
Right.
It's testing the test suite to see how good it is. So it's kind of a meta test in that sense. So it can be considered kind of separate from what the test suite is doing.
Yeah.
Even though we combine it together and run it at the same time, it's kind of a different beast that sits on its own.
Generally speaking, the place where I will use develop cover most intensively is when I'm reasonably confident that I have all the major features of a module ready, so that I can basically write the documentation, including how to call each of the methods. It's at that point that I will make repeated passes with develop cover, because that will show me what tests that still remain to be written.
Yeah, right. That's helpful. Like at work, we have a nightly build that runs develop cover. The problem is I don't find it that useful, because I'm actually more interested in how that coverage report compares with the coverage from the night before. Yeah. So I recently found out you can dump your report as JSON, but there's no utility out there that you can use to properly, like to nicely diff the two JSON files, like your two JSON reports between any two builds.
Yeah, at a previous Perl QA hackathon, the only one that I ever attended that was held in Lancaster in 2013, Paul Johnson and I and Thomas Klausner, Dom from Austria,
right.
We made some attempts at being able to compare two different develop cover runs, and I think Dom may have a CPAN module, but I don't think we really developed it well enough to recommend to other people.
Right.
It sounds like an interesting topic for future talk.
Part of what, as long as the changes is yelling at a cloud. Old man angry at changes, which we all are.
Yes, they're all angry at changes.
It ain't supposed to fix it.
Yeah.
Well, we should wrap things up.
Okay. So Jim, we're getting the cue to wrap things up here.
Okay.
It's good to see you. I don't know if everyone had a chance. Oh, you already had a chance to see Jim. Jim, do you want to see us?
If you care to expose yourselves, yes.
Let me see. All right. Here I am, Alex, and let's go around the room here.
Very good. Yeah, I hope to make a Toronto trip, probably, perhaps in the second part of this year, since I haven't been there since July of 2016.
Yeah, that'd be great. Are you looking at speaking when you're here?
Well, I always have it. Actually, I'm giving a talk at TPC in a couple of weeks, and I hope some of you can come there. And at the very least, I'll be able to drag out that when I come. Let me make sure you're meeting on the last Thursday of the month, correct?
Right.
Whether that's the 4th or the 5th Thursday, it's the last Thursday.
The last Thursday.
Okay. That'll I just need to know that to figure out travel plans.
Yeah. Well, the meetings are usually updated on meetup.com.
Yeah, I see them there. That's right.
I've been reminded to post it. So I'll try and remember to post the first week of every month to remind people, okay, the last of the month is coming.
Yeah.
Save the date.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Jim. See you. Hopefully, we'll see you here soon.